Good morning. I'm Amanda, host of the Crossroads Podcast, a podcast in which we'll be talking about walkability and anything relating to it in the Shore Drive area. I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with the landscape of this area already, but I would also guess that most of what you've seen has been from inside your car. Why is that? And how can we change it? Today, we'll figure out. I hope you enjoy this very first and last episode of the Crossroads Podcast. Obviously, everyone knows what a sidewalk is, but they're not the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Shore Drive. Maybe you imagine the beach or the myriad of restaurants in the area, but the first thing I think of is the Lesner Bridge. It's a beautiful bridge, still relatively new. It has wide and well-maintained bike lanes with railings on either side to separate them from traffic and falling into the water. It's pretty loud here, though. The traffic's pretty fast. When there isn't traffic around, it's pretty quiet. And the view's nice, so it makes up for all the loudness. There are some areas to rest, benches, overlooking the water. There's even a path underneath the Lesner. Overall, the Lesner is a pretty picturesque place. I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to walk or bike. I'd say that for pedestrians, cyclists, and roller skaters, the Lesner Bridge is a great spot to visit. But while the Lesner is such an exemplary feature of Shore Drive, the rest of the area fails to follow the bridge's example in anything other than pleasant scenery. No, I actually had to drive here because it's a bit too risky to walk all the way from my house to the Lesner. Along with that, the sidewalks continuing away from the Lesner and into the rest of the Shore Drive area have no places to rest, like benches or shaded areas. The sidewalks themselves are sometimes difficult to traverse, especially for the disabled or elderly, due to the uneven surface and their states of disrepair. I spoke with Hank Morrison, the chair of the Bayfront Advisory Committee, to get some more information about what people think.
So I probably get maybe a few complaints a month about sidewalks and walkability. Generally, the main complaints that I receive are in reference to things like broken sidewalks that make it difficult for people in wheelchairs or differently abled people to navigate the sidewalks, and also about gaps in the sidewalk network. I would imagine that the Public Works Department probably gets more complaints than I do, but we definitely still get a lot of input from people in the community.
In order to get some more opinions, I went on a walk around my neighborhood and asked a few people some questions. Jeanette. I'm Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. And how often do you take walks or go on runs?
3-4 times a week.
And do you go just in the neighborhood?
Mostly in this neighborhood, but sometimes over around Shore Drive as well.
And how would you rate the sidewalks and the roads there?
Sidewalks 0 to 1 when they exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Is your car your primary mode of transportation?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. Have you ever considered others?
I bike from time to time, but
Okay.
Otherwise,
But
car is the easiest for where I need to get.
Yeah. What Jeanette said is true. Shore Drive really lacks sidewalks, and as a result, it is much more convenient to drive around, which only increases the amount of cars to avoid for the few people that do choose to walk. Tracy, okay, I'm Amanda. How often do you walk around and stuff?
Once a day.
Once a day?
Once or twice.
Do you ever walk outside the neighborhood?
Yeah, I walk through Bayville Farm sometimes, and then I walk through to Thorogood.
Have you ever tried walking to your local grocery store or any place like that?
Yeah, that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
Except the only thing that's walkable is the Thorogood, what I call end caps, the stores there.
Oh, yeah.
We have walked in the street and gone to the bakery there, and the restaurants there.
Yeah.
Because we live a little further that way. That little neighborhood mart is very walkable, but that's it.
And how would you rate the walkability there?
Oh, very good. Yeah. The only bad part is crossing that road.
Oh, yeah.
But they did it at a crosswalk, so that helps.
That is good.
People don't always care that there's a crosswalk.
My name's Phoenicia.
How often do you walk or run?
I guess I go on bike rides occasionally, or maybe I roller skate sometimes.
So have you ever traveled without a car outside of this neighborhood?
We've gone to Taste, Rite Aid,
Yeah.
right outside the neighborhood.
How would you say that experience is, the roads, sidewalks?
Going to Rite Aid is not very fun, to be honest, because you have to go like in front of the little like shops, and there's not much of a sidewalk there, and it's like super close to the road. Kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
My name is Audrey.
Have you ever tried walking places like your grocery store or?
I think I did once, but then I kind of gave up because it's pretty far away, you know?
Did you notice anything about the sidewalks or the roads?
You know, they're dangerous. You
Yeah.
get run over
Yeah.
easily, become a squirrel.
Maybe you've heard about Shore Drive's reputation for being a dangerous place to walk in. It's extremely accident-prone, and there are practically no sidewalks around. In 2016, the speed limit had to be reduced from 45 miles per hour to 35 because so many accidents happened there. And while it is definitely less dangerous today, pedestrians and cyclists still have to be cautious of the many drivers that exceed the speed limit and ignore pedestrian crossings. But even despite all these obstacles, people still like to bike and walk around the area. But why?
Graham. Kind of just getting into running. I usually really not like running, but I'm realizing, hey, running's not that bad. It's cool. I think it's cathartic.
Do it like once a week or like once every like 3, not often, but I want to get into it more because like, weather's been warming up.
People clearly want to be able to walk around instead of having to drive everywhere. All of the people I interviewed enjoy walking or biking, but the Shore Drive area's unwelcoming environment deters a lot of pedestrians from further branching out into the wider area. So how can we create a safer, more extensive sidewalk network? And what is being done to achieve that right now? This is the Crossroads Podcast, and next we have City Planner Hank Morrison.
I would say that walkability is a pretty central theme for planners now. Virginia Beach also has what we call a complete streets policy, which basically requires all new roads and developments like that to have sidewalks and walking paths or even bike paths. I think, unfortunately, in the past, planners definitely prioritize roads over sidewalks, but I think cities and communities are now realizing the importance of walkability to the health and safety and kind of overall enjoyment of living in a city. So it's really become much more of a priority now than it was maybe in the past 50 or 60 years.
If you were to make a reform that would improve walking conditions in the Shore Drive area, what do you think would be most feasible right now?
So I would do a few things. First, I would plant more trees. Streets that have more trees shown in studies to have fewer automobile accidents, so it helps with like slowing down traffic. And it also creates shade for people who are walking and biking, so it's more comfortable to actually do that. And it also has the added benefit of absorbing emissions from vehicles and also helps with stormwater pollution and flooding. So there's a lot of benefits to planting trees. I would also add more bike lanes. Bike traffic also has been shown to slow down traffic, which makes things safer for everyone, including pedestrians, people on the bikes, and also people driving their cars. So I think that might require some education for both drivers and cyclists to be safe on the road, but that's not an impossible thing to do. And lastly, an easy reform would be to update the parking requirements along Shore Drive. So the city zoning ordinance requires new development to provide parking spaces kind of usually based off of the square footage of the new building. And our zoning ordinance is still from the 1980s. So the requirements are kind of outdated and don't really reflect the parking requirements like of today. So this leads to there being like a lot more parking than there needs to be. So more spaces dedicated to cars and parking instead of to the people that are using that space. So by reducing the amount of space needed for cars, we can rethink how to use that space in better ways for people to use.
So it seems the primary goal should be focusing more on people instead of cars. It makes sense, and as Hank said, urban planners have shifted their plans to better accommodate pedestrians and cyclists. If we consider the options that he presented, then achieving walkability is a bit less daunting. Planting trees and adding more bike lanes will make people more comfortable because they won't have to travel alongside fast-moving cars, and in slower traffic, there are fewer accidents. However, slower traffic does not change the fact that many places are still too far away to walk to. Think about the places you visit most often. How far are they from each other? Sure, the distance might be manageable, but not everyone wants to travel that distance. So it makes sense to reduce the amount of parking lots. Why? Reducing the amount of space used for parking allows more space for other stores and restaurants. This creates more urban density, which means that there will be more places people can go to in a smaller, more accessible area.
I kind of envision a city that has neighborhoods that are connected to things like schools and shopping and jobs and also fun things to do, where, you know, it's not necessarily a requirement to get in your car to go from one place to the other. You have options.
Right now, there really aren't many options for transportation. Going on foot, biking, or skating aren't very viable options, so maybe we can look to our public transportation system. Increased use of public transport reduces the need for cars, makes the roads safer, and clears up traffic, especially with trains, where traffic is not a problem at all. Buses are fairly uncommon. The majority of them are school buses, which excludes the adult population, and the few that are not school buses don't see much use. There isn't a train in the Shore Drive area, nor is there a subway system, so again, we come back to cars. But if we can create a larger demand for public transport, then maybe we can get some attention directed towards not just the state of our public transportation, but also our sidewalks. Because couldn't walking technically be called public transportation? Do you think there are any cons to a more walkable city?
As a planner, no, I don't think there are really any cons to a walkable city. Better walkability leads to healthier residents and also a cleaner environment. But say maybe city leadership would say that one of the main downsides for walkability would be the cost of building or rebuilding in a more pedestrian-friendly way. Adding things like sidewalks and bike lanes, it adds up. So it can kind of create barriers to achieving that kind of development. But then it's also, you have to start thinking about things like equity that should be considered in these types of plans. So all areas should be afforded the same benefit, especially when it comes to walkability, not just like a select few areas in the city. So I wouldn't say that that's a downside necessarily, but it's something to consider, and it takes time and money to do it properly. With more thoughtful planning in the future and a really engaged community, which we do have in Virginia Beach, we can really use kind of good design and good policy from the city council to make progress on walkability in Virginia Beach.
So yes, we are still a ways away from seeing the walkable city that we imagine, but it isn't light years away either. There are many remedies within our reach, and change is not something that will happen just through policy and external influence. We must utilize the community we have in order to bring about the differences that we want to see. Maybe it will be a long time before we can call our area truly walkable, but I think that the effort will be more than worth it. I'm Amanda, and this has been the Crossroads Podcast. Good night.